Hi, Josh. Welcome.
Hi,
How are you doing
I'm Miranda.
today? Thank you for joining me.
Sure.
So, everyone, this is Josh Bersin, Global HR Analyst and Industry Expert. Thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
So, tell us a little bit about yourself from your own perspective.
From my perspective, I guess it's the only perspective I have.
The best one,
I
personally.
have been I stumbled into HR about 20 years ago as an analyst in the training industry. And then for the last 20 years have been doing research and consulting in many, many aspects of human capital and training and technology and automation and AI and all that stuff that's now become business critical, especially today. So I'm really an industry analyst above all.
Very fascinating. And you're no stranger from working remotely and working from home. You've been doing it for quite some time now.
hmm
That's
I started working at home, and I got laid off from my the startup I worked for in 2019 in 2000 during the recession, three recessions ago, or maybe two recessions ago. And started working at home. So other than a period of time for about 5 years, where I worked for Deloitte, 6 years for Deloitte, I had learned how to work at home. So it's an
so
interesting experience, which just about everybody is now getting a chance to learn about.
You've really been publishing some great content on your website and LinkedIn lately that really captivated my attention personally. I love the positive spin and outlook, although being quite realistic about the circumstance. You have this sunshiny disposition of, giving forward-thinking strategy of how to kind of come through this
Yeah.
collectively. So that's why I invited you on today. But let's talk a little bit about before COVID-19,
Yeah.
before we go into the next phase. So, we just got out of a long 11-year bull. Talk a little bit about what the HR industry looked like prior to this epidemic.
Yeah, I mean, I call this the big reset because, for me, watching the last 11 years of growth, I was very much sensing we were near the peak anyway for a whole bunch of reasons. Companies were having a very hard time hiring. Everybody was very focused on reskilling and internal mobility because it was so hard to find people. Workers, employees were beginning to basically describe a lot of stress and anxiety from the workload, the pace, the digital always on experience at work. The stock market was teetering at an all-time high. The unemployment rate was at an all-time low. The traffic on the Bay Bridge was the worst I've ever seen. I couldn't get into restaurants because they were all full. I could tell everything was about to break. I did not, but I had no idea it would be a virus that would cause it. And so, I mean, for me, this is a black swan event for everybody, and particularly for a lot of companies. But if I think back about my career, this is not the first time this has happened. We had the recession in 2008. We had the 2001, 2000 recession. We had 9/11. I mean, these kinds of activities do happen many times during people's careers. Sometimes you are forced to reinvent yourself as an individual. Sometimes you get to do it in a positive way. Sometimes you have no choice. But I think it's part of being a professional at work. And this need for individual and organizational resilience is really, really high. And so one of the lessons from this particular situation is adapting new ways of working, lower budgets. Maybe we aren't going to have unlimited growth budgets. We're not going to have venture capital for startups. We're not going to keep buying tools. We have to focus on trust and care and health, things that we were sort of talking about on the side. We had a lot of discussions about responsibility and things, but now they're central to success, and leaders behaving that way. And then, of course, it turns out that in this particular crisis, HR is really kind of the heroes that are responsible for many of the changes that are taking place. So all of those things to me are part of where we are. But I do have a positive outlook because I've been through this, and I think most people do pull themselves up by their bootstraps and adapt.
I know in one of your segments on your actual webpage, which I've posted all the links for people to access, not only your webpage, your recent articles, but to follow you on social media. But you spoke to the fact that yes, unemployment is at an all-time high, but also there's a huge, vast amount of jobs in new industries and growth opportunities.
Right.
Those maybe seeking a change. Can you talk about some of the industries that you're seeing booming right now?
Yeah, it's well, first of all, the funny thing about this particular economic dislocation is the economy isn't sick, the people are sick. So the economy is reacting to the people. Whereas in the last recession, it was the economy that went south and then we had to adapt to it. So I think we will recover from this pretty quickly once we feel safe going back to work. And where it's already become very, very amazingly positive is companies that are in the delivery business, pharmaceutical companies, healthcare companies, insurance companies, digital entertainment companies. They're all hiring like crazy. So, if you happen to work for a retailer or you happen to work in a restaurant, you're kind of, or an airline, you're in trouble. And some of those people will find jobs in these other spaces, and some of them will hopefully be taken care of by the government or go on furlough until things turn around again. But if you look at the job market, there are almost 7 million jobs in the United States open right now, today.
That's
And there's
incredible.
about 155 million people working, 150 million maybe. So the question is, how adaptable are you as an individual? Can you make your rent payment during the transition period? I just got off the phone, for example, with Accenture, which started a massive program to allow companies to essentially swap workers. So when Verizon shut down all their stores, they had about 50,000 people that are really good at retail work. Well, they're going to find a way to give those people job offers at CVS where they're hiring 50,000 people to work in drugstores. So those kinds of things are happening. The private sector is incredibly adaptable in these kinds of change. The government is having a lot of issues, but I think the private sector is adapting pretty quickly. Yeah.
That's one of the things that you speak to too, is oftentimes in a long bowl we get a lot of bureaucracy and hands where they don't need to be, or an excess of employees, staff, and a lack of true budgeting. Now you're speaking to the fact that it's really time to kind of trim the excess, clean it up, tighten it up. Can you speak a little bit to that?
You've been reading my articles, Miranda. I appreciate that. Yeah.
I enjoy them.
One of the symptoms to me of the peak, which I was finding in all the companies we were consulting with, was bureaucracy. And the reason bureaucracy is created is many times because of growth. Companies that are growing hire people, they build new products, they go into new geographies, they go into new industries and market segments. Every time you hire a new senior leader, that person brings more people with them, a new idea, and it gets piled on, and you never throw away the stuff you already have. So you end up with this piles and piles and piles. And one of the companies out here, one of the most successful tech companies in the Bay Area, basically called it barnacles. He says, we got barnacles on the ship, we've been growing a long time, and we can't navigate through the water anymore because we've got so many barnacles. And I know this company really well, I won't mention who it is, and they're going to have to learn how to get rid of some of that stuff.
Break those barnacles.
But now we're going to be forced to, and the best way to do it is to get your budget slashed and say, all right, what are some of the things around here we really don't need anymore? Maybe we can do a little zero-based budgeting and reinvent the way we're going to market. And that's a healthy thing. And I think to some degree it's cyclical, and maybe it was time.
Absolutely. I mean, I think in any market, there's opportunity and growth and potential to really kind of transition into a better, brighter existence economically and, personally. We're seeing a lot of growth here in the Orlando market as places like, for example, Disney World, who almost never shuts down even for a hurricane. And all of their construction projects that were built out for 2021, 2022, painting the castle, so to speak, now got done in a matter of a couple of days. So, we're seeing some of that maintenance in the maintenance and construction industries, a little bit of a boom, and things that just needed a facelift, right? So, I mean, I think in many ways, when we can get past the idea that it's not going to last forever, it is temporary. when we get on the other side of it, I think we will be brighter and stronger together. So as companies big and small tune in today, watching a lot of C-suite executives, what advice do you have for them as far as how to shape their business on the other side of this within HR?
Well, I think the biggest learning, there's two things. Number one is you should probably accept the fact that these black swan events are not as unusual as you think. So the resiliency that you're now forcing into your organization for this crisis is a muscle you should use in the future. Number one. Number two, I think there's a big lesson being learned in the power of human trust and care for individuals. We can open up the economy, as they call it, and we can say, go back to work. And if people don't feel safe, they won't go back to work. Or they'll go back to work and they won't work well. Or they'll sue the employer for whatever goes wrong. So I think one of the lessons out of this is when you take care of the people take care of the organization. Now, for HR people, we kind of live that way and we understand that. But, I understand most business people may not think that way all the time. So that's a very significant learning too. And I think those two things are big lessons that we're all going to benefit from when we come out of this. And I think we'll come out of it, it's going to be a little while yet, but I think we're going to come out of it and things are going to grow very fast again.
Absolutely. It's incredible how much it's shifted the workspace and what we realize as far as what's necessity and what's kind of obsolete. I'm sure you would agree that there's going to be a lot more remote work and maybe the necessity of an office really is superfluous.
Well, and that's one of the things that probably won't change back. Working at home and working remotely, something like 23% more people are now working at home. It's about 40 or 50 million people in the United States. Will probably become more common. And, these big offices that everybody bought and the very high rents in the commercial real estate market in large cities, obviously that's under huge amounts of disruption now. And a lot of big companies told me, we didn't have a remote work policy and now we do. We just threw it together in the last 2 weeks. But now that that's there and they realize that they can actually operate very well, that will become much more common. So I think that's one of these things that's probably not going to go back to exactly the way it was. And then there's all the remote work tools, video conferencing like Zoom and all these video things that we're using, virtual reality. Some of this stuff that felt like it was fringe stuff is now mainstream. And so that the technology industry is going to help make sure that this continues to prosper as we come out of this.
So as we kind of wrap up, because I want to make the most of your time, I know how busy you are. What tools do you recommend maybe that large corporations are using that small companies should take under consideration as they adapt into this new space?
Well, I think the tools, there are almost too many tools. There's dozens of collaboration tools, dozens of messaging tools, dozens of engagement survey tools. I think the best thing to do is simplify the number of tools you give people and standardize, and give people a little bit of budget to take care of their home offices, their computers, their cameras, their internet access. You may not have a lot of money allocated to that if you haven't had a lot of workers at home before. But what you'll find is if you throw some money into that and you budget it and you give them a small set of standard tools to use, people will go home and they'll do their work and they'll be quite happy about it. There's all sorts of connection issues of staying in touch with people and communicating with people and checking in with them that you have to learn. But that would be my main recommendation. And I think if you look at Microsoft, what happened to Slack, what's happening to Workplace by Facebook, some of the sort of business-oriented collaboration tools, they're exploding. And you don't need all of these. Pick one or two, and that's enough.
Make it simple, make it easy. And then the last thing I really wanted to speak to with you is there's an entirely different space of integrity and trust that has to happen between employee and employer in this remote work environment. Can you speak a little bit to how we navigate that space, both from the HR standpoint of policies and procedures, but also from the human employee standpoint?
Well, at the high level, trust as a business is really a business imperative, because if you look at the research that the Edelman Trust Barometer has done, Most individuals and citizens don't trust their political system or the media the way they used to, but they do trust their employers. So employers have to live up to that trust. And when they don't live up to it, they're held accountable in a very significant way. But then at an individual and a team level, working at home, one of the biggest problems for managers when people work at home is you don't know what they're doing all day. You have to assume that they're doing the right thing, and you have to give them guidance and alignment and help them stay focused. And so it's a different kind of management style. You can't just wander around and see what everybody's doing. But I think it's pretty easy to learn if you're just sensitive to people. So there's that sense of trust and flexibility. Right now with families at home, kids at home, dogs, parents, there's a lot of distractions. So, being comfortable with that and giving people a little flexibility. I mean, it amazes me how everybody I talk to now is working from home. Nobody's had a haircut for 2 months.
I don't
They're
like
working in their casual clothes. There's a dog walking by, somebody's kids walking. You just need to be comfortable with that. And it is working. Companies that are taking sort of comfort with that are doing just really well.
Wonderful. That's wonderful. Josh, thank you so much for sharing this time with me today. I would ask two questions of you.
Sure.
One, I'd love to follow up after COVID-19 and kind of see how we've collectively come out of this and touch base with you. And two, if you wouldn't mind messaging me privately, if there's anyone else you feel I should connect with and collaborate with, my goal is to really come out of this brighter and stronger together and just spread a positive message. So if there's anyone you think that I should interview,
Absolutely.
another influencer or an industry expert, please let me know.
Absolutely.
And thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Miranda. Thank you very much.
Have a great day. Thank you for your wisdom.
Okay, thanks.
Bye, Josh.
Bye.